Greetings, sailors, and welcome to one of these things. Gosh, I forgot what it's called now. You know, the thing where you do the thing and sit down and you talk about the thing as the thing is playing in the background. One of them things. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm actually going to start this off with a little announcement relating a little bit to Patreon, but also quite relevant to what this video is showing as well. This is, in fact, a Patreon supporter video. And I've announced this particular thing to Patreon already, but essentially I'm giving up World of Tanks. I have decided that although there might be the very occasional replay, because I do very occasionally still play the game myself, I'm going to stop doing Patreon submissions for World of Tanks. I'm going to stop doing guest replays for World of Tanks, just in large part because the replays are such a pain to work with, and they have been since 1.0 rolled around, and I've just been struggling with them long enough, and I have now generally such little interest in World of Tanks myself as a player that although, you know, it got me launched in YouTube, it's where I started off, I just don't want to cover it anymore. If the replays were easier to work with, I probably still would, at least a bit. But no, it's just that combination of just being completely over it as a game, and now the replays being such a pain in the arse to work with, that has made this decision somewhat easy to come to. You know, I've certainly had plenty of time to think about things recently. So as a result, I am just going to be concentrating far more on World Warships, but also other games as well. I really did enjoy that week and a half where I was covering a bunch of other games, giving my impressions of some that were released, some that were still early access, so it'll probably be that same mix. And in fact, one of the ones that I have just gotten a press copy of is Steel Division 2, which is one that you can now buy through Wargaming's web store and the web launcher. So that will get its own video at some point. I thought that might be quite an interesting one to cover, because, you know, I've played a bit of RTS in the past, and I'm not necessarily great at them, but I can still find them quite enjoyable. So onto this video. We're starting off with Tugboat here in the Bayard, the Tier 8 French premium cruiser, and in fact this is what the follow-up replay is going to be as well. I was just looking through the replays I've got and decided that as there's two of them, that I might as well showcase them together, because it's a ship I really didn't give a lot of time to when it came out, partly as a consequence of me being less interested in it, and also Wargaming tending to throw a lot of ships at us at once. And that's just been the case for like the last year now, maybe a little longer, I don't know. They tend to throw out big clumps of ships for testing and previews and reviews, and it means you have to prioritise the ones that you actually want to look at versus the ones that are maybe less interesting to you. And this one was less interesting to me, so it came out with relatively little fanfare from myself, and I think not that much fanfare from other people as well, although it did get some coverage. So it's a fast, light cruiser, basically. It's got the speed boost, it's got the acceleration, the main battery reload acceleration doodad, and it's also got a defensive fire going as well. So quite a nice tool set for a cruiser, especially a light cruiser. It isn't the most interesting ship to me to play. You know, it's got the ballistics where you can sit behind an island and pew pew pew, so it does better in those circumstances than, say, the Kutuzov or the Irian, or is there anything else like Chapayev maybe. And although it is fragile, you know, that's not necessarily a unique thing at this tier. You do have to really try hard not to catch those broadside shots, though, and heck, even some ships, if they catch you angled, they'll still do some nasty damage. So it's a bit of a kind of a edge of your seat ship. You've got to be on your tippy toes when you're playing this, and hope that you don't lose too much damage all at once. Having mentioned the Irian, though, I would certainly say it's a more fun ship to play than the Irian, which is basically a downgraded Kutuzov with deep water torps. So I'm not entirely sure why we have the Irian as a thing. So that Yukikaze was trying a bit of sneaky creeping round the edge, maybe to go after the carrier eventually. I don't really know, but it hasn't paid off for them at all. Now they are within very close range of rather fast-firing light cruiser, so it's not going to go well for them. It really isn't. This was a bit of a misplay, which has worked out very nicely for Tugboat, because he's just getting to nom 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 on all this damage. Not that he has a huge amount so far, but this is actually going to turn out to be a pretty good XP game. This is, though, this match, it's a little bit of a warm-up for the next one. I mean, this is a decent game, and actually, as I say, we'll have a very good XP result. In fact, I think maybe even better than the second game. The second game is definitely the more exciting one. It's funny how that can be sometimes where, you know, just having a good result isn't necessarily the same as having an exciting result. So they've won this flank more or less, although that York is not looking good. That's the Ranger going for them. This is actually a double carrier game. This is one of the other reasons why I decided to show this one off, to let you see how the AA does when it's top tier. It's a tier 6 carrier and a tier 8 carrier. In fact, one of them is a tier 6 carrier is certainly quite useful. And even the tier 8 carrier is not too bad, considering the matchmaking. In fact, I think both these games are top tier. I think, or is the... No, I think the second game... Is the second game a tier 9? I can't remember now. But either way, certainly not the harshest matchmaking this ship can see by a long shot. So they've lost their own York, or they're about to lose their own York. Or is that a different York? I think that might be a different York, actually. And the enemy York, well... There's plenty of... Oh no, there they are. It is that York. It's just very low health. Yeah, between himself and the Roma that's here, this other York's not getting out of this alive. And in fact, it looks like he might well get the kill. Although for some reason he switches to AP for those shots. Once the York starts to turn broadside, then absolutely AP will do the job. But for that very highly angled kind of shot, I'm not sure why he switched to AP. Just that little bit too early. I don't know. Anyway, not that it mattered. He got the kill. So we're going to jump ahead in a moment. It's actually just hoovering up some more plane kills. And I actually cut out about a minute. And nothing really happens except he hoovers up even more plane kills. They're clearly coming for him and this Roma, because they're, you know, the smaller group of ships. On the other flank, I mean, they got pushed out of the sea cap. But you can see for yourself from the team list that the enemy team fared just as badly in terms of losses. And given that, and given that they hold 2/3 of the cap circles, this team is easily winning. Now at this point, instead of and it is, you know, a relatively healthy Massachusetts down there, there's the Fiji. Instead of maybe trying to get behind an island and pew at things, I mean, there's not a lot of help from the south now. It basically is just the Molotov, so it's him and the Roma. He decides to stick more with the Roma, I think, to provide him with some AA support. But the thing is, him being then lit up by these planes is perfectly spotting him to be shot at by the Massachusetts and the Fiji. So this is the part where I felt he could have been paying a bit more attention to the ships that were shooting at him rather than what he obviously is doing, which is helping out this Roma. And that's not to say I think he's doing the wrong thing here. I think he just could have been paying more attention to these shots incoming from the south when he isn't actually looking at all. He's fully focused on the planes. And I'm sure the Roma is glad of the extra, you know, the extra AA, but he's very healthy, so it's not like the Roma is in a critically low state of health. The person that's mainly in danger here is Tugboat himself from the Massachusetts, and he's turning broadside here relative to this. You know, the Massachusetts has shots right now. This could be really risky. So, yeah, but he's gonna get away with it. I'll tell you that much. I mean, if he was to end the game being killed by the Massachusetts right now at this moment and only having 38,000 health, that would make for kind of a boring ending. But we're not going to quite end there. I think it is just the Fiji that has shots right now, although the Massachusetts is starting to come around the island. So, we'll see if he can get some extra damage out of this, because well, some of those planes look suspiciously like they're coming from behind this island rather than further to the east. And the Ranger was actually last spotted coming this way, so it might not indeed be a bad thought that certainly at least one of the carriers would be here, because it's a very common spot to find carriers hiding out. It's obviously, you know, blocks a line of sight from the south, as the opposite island does in the south. But as it's going to turn out, in fact, it's both. The Shikaku came and turned around over here as well. Now, there's very little time in terms of points. The Fiji and the Massachusetts did actually manage to capture the middle, but well, these carriers are now more or less at his mercy. And look how high his plane kills are at this point. The only thing that's going to limit Tugboat from actually doing better out of this match is just how close they are now to winning. And if he kills one of these carriers, then that's going to trip the end of the match right there. And it looks very much like the torpedoes will do the job. So, alas for Tugboat, he doesn't get a chance to nom away on the Shikaku as well as the Ranger. But still, that was just shy of 100,000 damage with 77 plane kills, which is quite an absurd number these days, it feels like. But no, he managed to rack up that many and get himself 2400 XP into the bargain. So yeah, definitely not without flaws that match, but it was a good result in the end, and you got to see exactly how good this AA can be, potentially. Because I don't think either of those carrier players were... I don't know, they just kept coming after him and kept coming after the Roma and just kept feeding him planes, so that certainly helped top up his XP score at the end of it. And as it's a premium ship, you got a decent amount of credits there as well. So next, it's the exact same ship. It is a top tier game, okay, and this time it's Piritskeña, who is on two brothers. And again, there is a carrier in play, but just a single one this time. So the planes might still be a factor, but without that extra carrier buzzing around, he's unlikely to rack up the same 77 plane kills somehow. This is the standard perma camo, by the way. The previous one we saw was the one with all the draperies on it, the French event camo that was made available with all the tokens and all that jazz, and I've actually got a bunch of those same camos for the destroyers as well. I think I also will have it for the Bayard. I mean, they do now, Wargaming, provide us CCs with the premium ships as they come out for the most part. I think the only ones they don't do are the things like the steel ships. So that, I think, either came with it or else I got it from the same French event. But anyway, it's not a bad looking camo, but I quite like the regular perma camo that you're seeing here as well. So this is a standard game this time, and well, here's where Hydra might come in useful, but the Z-23 has gotten spotted by the Shenyang at this point anyway, so this is a good start, getting to chew on a destroyer. Although we'll see if the Shenyang actually doesn't actually live long enough to get saved there. But yeah, he's managed to net himself a kill and not really take that much damage. But we do there's another destroyer on this flank as well. And this was maybe a little bit of a risky move, pushing forward this far in a light cruiser. But by this point we have established that most of the enemy ships have gone to the other flank. So yeah, a little bit risky, but it's only that Tirpitz that especially has shots on him. He's actually waited until the Tirpitz is fired to make his turn, although the reload on the Tirpitz, they might squeeze off another salvo. There we go, but he's going to get lucky. They didn't really give anything like enough lead. And he does have just the tail end of his speed boost still going, so that certainly helps as well, especially when you're manoeuvring. That's probably the biggest advantage of the speed boost for the cruisers and the destroyers especially, is being able to keep up the speed in turns, which absolutely is a an incredibly useful factor when you are manoeuvring to avoid incoming fire. So once again, we've got a destroyer trying to sneak up the flank. This time it's like Kagero being chased after by the Fantask, who can easily outrun them, but the Fantask isn't looking great on health. And the enemy carrier absolutely knows that that makes them an easy target, so here come the rocket planes, and the Kagero meanwhile has just been able to smoke up, which the Fantask can't. And this is still one of my biggest issues with the French destroyers, is that if there's a carrier in play, it can just make your life short and miserable, because there's nothing you can do, especially apart from run to allied AA cover. Otherwise you are basically boned if a carrier decides that they are going to particularly pick on you, because you don't have good AA, you don't have a defensive AA, there's not really any point in taking AA skills, and of course you don't have any smoke. So that Fantastic, I'll tell you right now, isn't going to come out of this alive, unfortunately. But the Kageros just run out of their smoke, so we at least know where they are. For some reason, both the battleships decided to turn around at this point as well. And considering that the Kagero, you know, the location has been known for a little while, it's going to make what happens next a little bit baffling, perhaps. Because, yep, there's the torpedoes. The North Carolina and the Tirpitz just turned around and then sailed in a nice straight line. And, well, although the Kagero has died, he's going to land a whole bunch of those torps into the Tirpitz. The Carolina got away with it, but that's only because he had Tirpitz spaced armour. For some reason, that Kagero dropped the second lot as it looks like a widespread, so if they hadn't, maybe they would have scored even more hits. Meanwhile, in the middle, we had an Edinburgh who tried to go down the middle towards the enemy cap for some reason and was immediately countered by a Tirpitz, who's now doing exactly the opposite. And that's what PointyHairedJedi is going to focus his attention on now. The other flank seems to be pretty even at this point. I mean, more ships, I think, came to this flank of PointyHairedJedi's team than the other side, but somehow they've just about held it even. It really was only the two destroyers that tried to push that Tirpitz back right off. This torp drop, by the way, I left this in rather than skipping ahead because that's a nice dodge. Just manages to skirt around that the edge of that torp while the Lexington tries to get them, and obviously the Lexington decides to you know, give it another go, but by that point his planes have sustained so much damage that it's a complete non-starter. So there's that Tirpitz. There is a destroyer on the other side of them. PointyHairedJedi has put their own torps out, the carrier's going in, and well, there goes the Benson, unfortunately, dies to the Tirpitz's secondaries, but because this Tirpitz's guns were faced the other way, PointyHairedJedi gets use out of his MRBB and takes down this Tirpitz to very low health. Obviously those guns are coming round for him, but, well, even if the torpedo hadn't finished off the job, his guns would have. So that's his third kill, up to about 38k, not terrible, not great so far, but you know, we were at about that stage in the other game as well. And now we've got these pressing enemy ships to deal with. There's not a lot of his own allies left on that flank. The enemy team does seem to have gained the upper hand to some extent, but because PointyHairedJedi and the North Carolina and the Tirpitz that were all on this side are really quite healthy and have basically just been able to turn around after disposing of those destroyers and that Tirpitz that came through the middle. They're still pretty evenly matched. They're basically coming into range of all these enemy ships at just the right time. So this low health North Carolina, obviously a high priority, and PointyHairedJedi is able to do exactly what I mentioned in that first replay, just use island cover to pew without being spotted at all. And there's kill number 4. And as there are still 5 enemy ships left, this seems like a pretty good setup for a Kraken. It seems like a really strong possibility, especially given he's in a fast-firing light cruiser, to pick up the coveted Kraken award. But we'll have to see if that comes to pass, obviously. It's just, you know, with that many ships left alive, it seems like there's a pretty good chance. So his own forces are, his own team is regrouping. They've knocked out the North Carolina. They're now focusing this Alabama. And this is how to do it, basically. You just focus the ships down one by one. But unfortunately, there are some planes coming in that are about to get him spotted. And so this cover is not necessarily great anymore, especially as he's sat broadside here in a squashy cruiser. So one might well decide he's worth shooting at. So, yeah, there we go. Somebody has. He's going to start accelerating forwards. He's also shooting down some planes in the meantime. And, yep, there's the Alabama. And he hits the speed boost just to get him going quicker. But, ouch. That's still enough to take away nearly half of his hit points in one go. And, of course, now he's accelerated out of cover. It's kind of hard to just ease yourself back in again, so now he's got to rely on his manoeuvring a lot more. But this Alabama is in serious trouble at this point, just for the withering amount of fire they are taking from various sources. It's not going to be, hopefully, that much more of a challenge to hit them. And so, knowing that the Alabama's in trouble, he actually switches his attention to that Asashio briefly, but they've immediately spoked up upon that happening. So back to the Alabama. We'll see if we can finish them off, and maybe we'll get that Kraken. So there's a fire going. The Alabama has used their damage control party, so that's going to stick. There's the deep water torps, which the Tirpitz has neatly avoided by slowing down. And we also got the enemy carrier trying to help out their Asashio by putting some fighters over there, but they don't seem to really, you know, that's a bit of a wasted fighter drop, but the thought, you know, it's the thought that counts, I suppose. So another fire on the Alabama. Come on, he just needs to get that final tick. They are trying to heal their way out of it, but surely he can get this. Surely this can be the Kraken. Surely. This is so close. But as it turns out, nope, it's the Tirpitz that gets the kill. Okay, well, right, well that leaves the Amagi and the Asashio and the carrier. The Amagi's now down to about half health. I mean, they're pretty much in a winning position at this point. The Asashio can't torp him, so he doesn't have to worry about that at all. He can see very clearly what the Amagi's turrets are doing. Although they're turning around a bit, this might be a prelude to bringing his turrets to bear on PointyHairedJedi. And at this range, that would be pretty darn, you know, painful. Those 16-inch guns would certainly tear him several new holes that he didn't want to be there. But in switching targets to the Asashio, he's missed his opportunity to get the Amagi kill. So okay, he's now down to 2 chances to get his Kraken. But it's an Asashio. It's not got a lot of health. Surely he can do this. Oh, no. No, it's actually the Shikaku that gets the kill, who's now up to 4 kills themselves. And you can see at this point, PointyHairedJedi is getting a little bit, you know, it's one of those games where he just wants the Kraken. And he's had so many chances at this Kraken, and it's just not happening. But there is still the potential. He just needs to find that enemy carrier, and we can get there. We're also approaching 100,000 damage as well. If he finds the carrier, who, as it turns out, is just halfway up the map, just sitting there, basically waiting to be found, not trying to really prolong matters. In fact, they seem to have given up entirely. There's no more planes at this point emanating forth. So, yeah, rather than run away, rather than try and strike at the remaining ships, he's just decided to sit and sacrifice himself so the game can be over, I guess. Well, you know, it means that it will be less frustrating time-wise, I suppose. And the good news for PointyHairedJedi is it's more damage and it's a chance to get this Kraken. Finally, surely he can do this. The North Carolina as well, at least one of them will have a shot. And there we go, we see the shells coming in. But they weren't exactly doing a lot of damage, and the accuracy at that range against what for them is going to be an angled Lexington, although a stationary target, you know, it does make it easier. But surely this will be it. This will be the kill. Oh, someone else having an attempt there, but oh, they're down to really low health. Come on, one more salvo, and he's... No! 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 Why? There is no God. Well, as it turns out, Kraken denied. So hardly, not hardly denied, you know what I mean, denied hard. Anyway, English is hard, you guys, as well, obviously. So I think that's around the same XP, but just slightly less this time for Pyritskenia. And you can see what I mean, you know, it was around the same XP result, but definitely a more fun match in how it worked out. Although I think part of the fun was just witnessing Pyritskenia's frustration at being denied quite so hard that reward he was so obviously jonesing for. But you know, I'm sure we've all had matches like that where it's just, it doesn't quite happen, it just doesn't quite come together, your shots just don't quite behave enough to get that final kill, and somebody else just sneaks in and kills it before you. So yeah, sadly none of the none of the friendly battleships were quite gentlemanly enough to withhold fire to let him get that Kraken. They were just intent on hoovering up that last bit of damage and that last kill. I mean, most of the damage from the carrier was actually, you know, it was Pyritskenia's, but that North Carolina just came in and got that last, like, 1,000 health or whatever it was, and that was that. So that's it for this pair of Patreon supporter replays. I can only, as ever, express my gratitude to my patrons for basically allowing me to keep going with the channel, even though I've not been doing that great and not been feeling that great recently. But you know, I'm hoping this decision with cutting Whirler tanks out of the roster does make things a bit easier, because you know, I don't have to then think about, am I going to do tanks, am I going to do warships, oh, I did some warships replays recently, I better do tanks, but I don't really want to do tanks. Welcome to my brain. Anyway, it should make it a bit easier, because now I can just go, okay, let's do warships. We'll see. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you have, you can do all the usual things down below, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.